Hello, my dear. You know what the real problem is? Not that you're misunderstood, not that people don't get you. The problem is far more inconvenient than that. Your depth carries weight most minds can't hold without cracking somewhere. Your energy doesn't just walk into a room, it rearranges it. You don't need to speak to unsettle people. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to announce your intelligence. Your presence alone forces people into a version of themselves they spend their whole life avoiding. That's what happens when someone operates on a level others can't even map in their head. They don't see you, they feel you. And what they feel is pressure. You're not intense because you try to be. You're intense because your mind refuses to run on the shallow bandwidth everyone else uses to survive. While they obsess over appearances, you track motives. While they cling to narratives, you dissect patterns. While they rely on assumption, you rely on observation. You don't wait for evidence, you register the truth before they articulate it. That unnerves people. They're used to speaking without being understood. They're not used to being seen before they finish their sentence. You walk in, and something in them flinches, not externally, but internally. Where their self-deception hides, you catch micro-tensions they deny. You sense emotional leakage they thought they buried. You watch contradictions form in their body before they form in their mouth. And because you're not loud about it, the dissonance hits them even harder. It's not what you expose verbally, it's what you expose simply by existing. People want depth until they're standing in front of someone who actually has it. They romanticize awareness until they feel the burn of being evaluated by it. They praise intelligence until it registers that your mind could decode them faster than they can explain themselves. They're not avoiding you. They're avoiding the version of themselves that comes out around you. The unpolished, unfiltered, unguarded self they've spent years covering with performance. Your intelligence is not regular. It's not academic. It's not performative. It's the kind that cuts through people. Quietly, precisely, without mercy. Most people can't handle being around that because it means they can't hide. They can't manipulate perception. They can't present a cleaner version of themselves and expect you to buy it. You don't buy versions. You detect realities. And that level of insight is terrifying for those who build their identity on pretending. You ever notice how quickly admiration mutates into fear around you? They start fascinated. They end unsettled. They start intrigued. They end defensive. They start comfortable. They end exposed. It's not coincidence. It's contact with a deeper frequency. People feel safe around those who match their depth. They feel threatened around those who exceed it. You exceed almost everyone around you. Not because you're trying, because your internal wiring cannot operate any differently. You watch people switch their persona mid-conversation. You watch their tone adjust. You watch their posture shift. You watch their expression glitch for a fraction of a second when you say something that hits too close to the truth. It's the look someone gives when they realize their facade won't hold. It's subtle, but you catch it every time. That's why people are uneasy. Not because you did anything wrong, but because their ego senses danger around you. You're not the type who gets manipulated by flattery. You're not the type who gets controlled by guilt. You're not the type who gets steered by emotional bait. You've had your mind broken before, reassembled it yourself, and built it back stronger than the environment that tried to ruin it. People sense that. They sense the resilience. They sense the self-authority. And people who rely on influence feel powerless around someone who can't be swayed. Your energy goes deeper than words. It's the way you look at someone when their motives don't align with their performance. It's the way you pause when something feels off. It's the way your intuition catches inconsistencies faster than they can patch them. That type of perception is rare. That type of awareness is a threat, especially to those who prefer living unchallenged, unexamined, unexposed. You're not operating in the same mental dimension as those around you. They run on reaction. You run on recognition. They run on impulse. You run on insight. They run on comfort. You run on truth. And no matter how much they try to pretend otherwise, people feel the difference. They feel it in their chest. They feel it in their insecurities. They feel it in the way they start choosing their words carefully around you. Not because you're judging them, but because they know you could if you wanted to. You ever notice how people start explaining themselves without you asking? That's what happens when someone feels subconsciously examined. They start revealing too much. They start overcorrecting. They start patching holes you haven't pointed out. They start apologizing for things you didn't mention. That's because your presence alone triggers an internal audit they didn't consent to. They sense a level of awareness they can't outrun. Your intelligence is not the type that needs attention. It's the type that reconfigures the environment. People feel the difference between you and everyone else, and that difference makes them uneasy because it exposes their limitations. They're used to being the smartest in the room. They're used to controlling the narrative. They're used to getting away with half-truths and incomplete stories. But with you, they can't. You register inconsistencies like a reflex. You're not intimidating because you're loud. You're intimidating because you're impossible to predict. They don't know what you notice. They don't know what you already know. They don't know how deeply you've read them in the first minute. They don't know how quickly you connect dots they thought were unconnected. That uncertainty eats at people. It makes them cautious. It makes them defensive. It makes them resentful. Your energy forces self-awareness in people who have avoided self-awareness their entire life. They feel watched, not by your eyes, but by your accuracy. They feel decoded, not by your words, but by your attention. They feel stripped, not physically, but psychologically. That's what powerful perception does. It extracts truth from people without asking permission. And here's the part that intensifies everything. You don't overplay your depth. You don't announce what you see. You don't expose everything you observe. You hold back. You stay calm. You stay composed. And that terrifies them more than anything else. An unpredictable mind is a threat. A quiet mind is a bigger one. But a quiet, unpredictable mind that sees everything. That's a level people are not built to handle. You think you're alone because you're doing something wrong. You're alone because people sense danger in the way your awareness operates. Not danger in the violent sense, danger in the truth sense, danger in the clarity sense, danger in the no illusion survives here sense. People who depend on pretense can't survive in your presence. They expose themselves through their reactions. Your intelligence is not a tool. It's a weapon forged from every betrayal you endured, every disappointment you dissected, every inconsistency you tracked until it formed a pattern you could predict. You didn't get this awareness from books. You got it from wounds. That type of intelligence carries an edge people can't blunt. They feel it instantly. Most people run on default settings. You run on self-reconstruction. That difference makes your mind heavier, more grounded, more precise. People can sense the weight of your thought even when you're silent. They can sense the depth behind your stare. They can sense the calculation behind your calm. They can sense the awareness behind your restraint. And restraint is the most threatening thing of all. Because a mind like yours doesn't react. It evaluates, it measures, it decides, it cuts. And people would rather face someone who reacts than someone who understands. Reactions can be manipulated. Understanding cannot. You don't get pulled into people's emotional traps. You don't fall for bait. You don't collapse into chaos with them. You stay detached, observant, focused. That detachment is not coldness, it's precision. People interpret it as cold because they're used to emotional chaos being the norm. Your clarity looks like danger to them. You're not feared because you're violent. You're feared because your awareness dismantles power structures. People who rely on confusion lose their influence around you. People who depend on emotional manipulation become ineffective. People who hide behind charm get exposed. People who speak half-truths get cornered. You neutralize strategies without trying, just by standing there. That's why people talk about you when you're not around. That's why they watch you out of the corner of their eye. That's why they change their behavior mid-sentence. That's why they second-guess themselves before speaking. They can feel the dissection happening behind your eyes. And yet you question yourself. You wonder why relationships crumble. You wonder why people push away. You wonder why you trigger reactions you never intended. You wonder why your presence feels heavy to others. You assume it's a flaw. You assume it's your fault. You assume you're too much. You're not too much. They're too small for the level you operate on. They don't even realize it consciously. Most people never do. Their mind just registers a threat in your depth the same way a deer registers a shadow in the woods. Instinctively, automatically, before logic arrives to explain anything. You walk into their life, and their ego pulls an alarm. Not because of who you are, but because of what you expose, everything they've been running from internally. And that kind of internal exposure doesn't feel enlightening. It feels dangerous. You're not a comfort zone. You're a psychological mirror, a spiritual pressure point, a cognitive disruptor. They don't have language for that. They only have reactions. And their reactions tell you more truth than their words ever could. You think you're losing people because you're wrong. But the truth is, most people don't want to stand next to someone who forces them to confront the version of themselves they've been hiding behind excuses. Your energy doesn't soothe ego. It challenges it. Your intelligence doesn't stroke insecurity. It exposes it. Your presence doesn't maintain illusions. It dissolves them. And dissolving illusions feels like emotional injury to people who built their identity on pretending. People don't avoid you because they see something dark in you. They avoid you because they see something true in you. Truth feels hostile to those who survive on denial. Depth feels invasive to those who live shallow. Awareness feels predatory to those who manipulate perception. You don't intend any of this. You simply perceive reality at a depth that most people can't withstand without cracking open emotionally. You've always sensed this, even as a child. You noticed when someone's tone didn't match their intent. You caught lies before you had the vocabulary to explain how. You felt betrayal before the actions were visible. While other kids believed faces at face value, you were dissecting behavior without trying. Call it sensitivity. Call it intuition. Call it intelligence. Doesn't matter. What matters is that your mind grew in layers most people never reach, And that layered awareness follows you everywhere. You notice too much. You sense too much. You process too much. You understand too much. People who operate on surface-level thinking interpret that as danger. They feel scanned around you. They feel decoded. They feel stripped of their carefully curated persona, all without you saying a single abrasive word. Imagine what it feels like to be someone who hides behind charm, performance, and social masks, and then you walk in with an aura that makes pretenders feel transparent. How do you think they're going to react? With gratitude? With admiration? No. They react with distance, with defensiveness, with quiet hostility, with passive avoidance. They pull away, not because you're wrong for them, but because you're too accurate for them. Your intelligence is not loud, but it's ruthless. Not cruel, ruthless. It cuts through everything unnecessary. It slices away pretense. It sees patterns before people articulate them. You catch emotional currents under conversations like a hunter catching movement in the dark. That kind of awareness isn't normal. That kind of perception isn't comfortable for people who depend on confusion to stay in control. Most people live inside a narrow tunnel of thought. They aren't used to someone whose mind operates like a panoramic view. You're not just aware of what's happening. You're aware of the motive behind it, the history beneath it, the emotion driving it, the wound hiding inside it, the pattern connecting it. Your mind doesn't just observe, it dissects, it analyzes, it anticipates, it predicts, it recognizes, it warns, it understands. And that kind of mind is intimidating, even threatening, to people whose entire identity is built around pretending they're more put together than they are. You're not intimidating because you're aggressive. You're intimidating because you're aware. People can handle aggression. They can't handle awareness. Aggression can be dismissed. Awareness cannot. Aggression can be argued. Awareness can only be acknowledged. Aggression is emotional. Awareness is structural. Someone aggressive can be fought. Someone aware cannot be fooled. Your energy carries the imprint of everything you survived, and people feel that the same way animals feel the weather shifting before a storm, not through explanation, through instinct. You carry a seriousness in your aura that comes from confronting your own darkness instead of avoiding it. You carry wisdom that doesn't match your age because you didn't get it through books. You earned it through wounds. You carry calmness that doesn't come from passivity. It comes from having already lived through situations that would annihilate most people. People feel the density of your experience even when they don't know your story. They feel the intensity of your insight even when you stay quiet. They feel the gravity of your presence even when you don't speak. That's why they shift around you. That's why their voice cracks. That's why their posture changes. That's why they act out of character. They're responding to the psychological pressure your presence activates. People can sense depth even when they can't comprehend it. And your depth is not poetic. It's destabilizing. It disrupts settings. It challenges identities. It makes comfortable people uncomfortable and insecure people visibly anxious. They feel evaluated. They feel measured. They feel exposed. They feel like you see through them, not because you want to, but because that's how your perception is wired. And here's something darker they'll never admit. Your intelligence threatens their role in the hierarchy. Every social group, family, friends, co-workers has an unspoken hierarchy. Someone is the leader. Someone is the follower. Someone is the loud one. Someone is the agreeable one. Someone is the comedic distraction. Someone is the unthreatening background character. People rely on these unspoken roles to maintain emotional control. Then you show up, and you don't accept any assigned role. You don't shrink. You don't pretend. You don't play along. You don't bend your intelligence to avoid making weaker minds feel inferior. You don't dim your instinct because someone else is fragile. You don't silence your intuition to avoid unsettling people who live on autopilot. Your presence destabilizes their emotional ecosystem. It disrupts the silent rules they use to keep themselves comfortable. You don't mean to, but you break their psychological structure simply by existing outside of it. And they panic, not because you hurt them, but because you disrupt their self-narrative. They're used to being the insightful one, the awakened one, the clever one, the calm one. Then you walk in, and their internal story collapses. Depth always collides with delusion. Clarity always collides with fantasy. Awareness always collides with performance. Truth always collides with people who fear being seen. That collision is why people react so strongly to you. It's not you. It's the version of themselves they meet through you. You're not operating at the same level they are. Your mind adjusts too quickly. Your intuition expands too efficiently. Your awareness slices too precisely. Your emotional radar detects too accurately. That level of functioning makes people feel slow around you, even inferior, and inferiority breeds resentment. But here's the part that makes everything even more intense. You don't pick sides, you pick truth. And truth doesn't have favorites. People who rely on manipulation fear someone they can't manipulate. People who rely on deception fear someone they can't mislead. People who rely on chaos fear someone they can't emotionally destabilize. People who rely on status fear someone who sees through status. People who rely on image fear someone who sees character. You don't run on the same emotional economy everyone else does. You don't beg for belonging. You don't chase approval. You don't negotiate your boundaries. You don't collapse into guilt when someone tries to pressure you. You don't get seduced by flattery. You don't get controlled by criticism. You observe both with the same calm expression that terrifies people more than any aggressive outburst ever could. Calm intelligence is more frightening than explosive emotion. Stillness unnerves people more than shouting. Accuracy injures ego more than confrontation. And your accuracy is lethal. You see patterns in relationships others haven't even recognized yet. You see red flags before they take shape. You catch lies in their tone, not their words. You notice when someone changes their behavior because of jealousy, resentment, envy, insecurity. You sense competition before it becomes active. You feel when someone is pretending to support you, but is threatened by you internally. You detect what others hide under politeness. You interpret what others reveal through their silence. Your mind works like a scanner, instantly reading the emotional data other people ignore. And the fact that you stay composed while doing it scares them even more. If you were dramatic, they could dismiss you. If you were unstable, they could discredit you. If you were loud, they could call you problematic. But you're none of that. You're composed, you're measured, you're controlled. That makes your insight impossible to argue with. They fear you because you're accurate, not because you're aggressive. And the deeper truth is even darker. Your depth makes them feel irrelevant. They want to impress you but feel like they can't. They want to understand you but don't know how. They want to connect with you but feel unqualified. They want your respect but don't know how to earn it. They want to matter to you but fear they're ordinary in comparison. Your presence forces them to question themselves. Why can't I think like that? Why does this person see so much? Why can't I hide anything around them? Why do I feel exposed around them? Why does their energy feel so heavy? Why can't I read them the way they read me? People resent what they cannot understand. People fear what they cannot predict. People avoid what they cannot influence. People attack what they cannot become. And you check all 4 boxes. Your depth is beyond their comprehension. Your intelligence is beyond their capability. Your awareness is beyond their comfort zone. Your intuition is beyond their expectation. That's why you watch friendships dissolve after you say something true. That's why people distance themselves after you interpret their behavior too accurately. That's why people label you as intense, complicated, difficult, or too deep. That's why they turn you into the villain the moment they realize you're not someone they can control or mislead. They're not reacting to your character, they're reacting to their limitations. And here's something you need to understand. People who live shallow cannot survive extended contact with someone who sees the world through a deeper lens. Your existence is a psychological confrontation they didn't ask for. And instead of rising to meet it, they run from it. They run from insight. They run from accountability. They run from growth. And because you represent all 3, they run from you. But here's the twist that changes everything. The deeper you go into yourself, the harder it becomes for people to hide their true face around you. You start noticing inconsistencies instantly. You recognize emotional patterns before they play out. You sense when someone is about to betray you long before they consciously decide to. You feel when someone's intention shifts. You catch when someone envies you, even when they're smiling. You detect when someone pretends to be neutral but is secretly threatened. Your intuition is not a feeling, it's a warning system built from experience. And most people have never met someone who can read them before they revealed themselves. It's unnatural to them, uncomfortable, unpredictable. And unpredictability is the enemy of insecure minds. People don't want to be seen at the level you see. They want to be admired. They want to be validated. They want to be praised. They don't want to be understood. Because understanding reveals the truth behind their behavior. And most people don't want truth. They want distraction. They want comfort. They want narratives that protect them from their own reflection. You are not a narrative. You are a revelation. And revelations make people uncomfortable. You're operating on a level they can't comprehend, not because you're trying to be superior, but because you've lived through things that forced your mind to function differently. You see the world through depth because superficiality nearly destroyed you. You read people because not reading them once cost you too much. You sense danger early because danger arrived too many times without warning. You connect dots because missing patterns hurt you. You became perceptive because life demanded it. And perceptive people are not digestible. You're not meant to blend into shallow environments. You're not meant to be understood by everyone. You're not meant to sit comfortably in circles built on insecurity, pretense, gossip, or emotional chaos. People react the way they do because you're not built from the same material they are. You don't need validation to stay standing. You don't need attention to feel real. You don't need approval to move forward. You don't need permission to think deeply. Your existence disrupts the psychological comfort of anyone who survives through avoidance. Your energy is too deep for emotional instability. Your intelligence is too sharp for manipulation. Your intuition is too strong for deception. Your awareness is too complete for performance. And now something else is happening. something you've been noticing more and more. The gap is widening. The reactions are intensifying. The energy around you is shifting faster. Because the deeper your evolution goes, the harder it becomes for the world around you to maintain its masks. And the truth is unavoidable now. People aren't afraid of you. They're afraid of what they become in your presence. Because the second you step into their orbit, something inside them begins to unravel. Something they've kept locked down, something they've avoided, sometimes for years. You don't trigger fear by force. You trigger fear by accuracy. You force people to meet themselves without speaking a single accusation. That's the part they can't handle. The confrontation doesn't come from you. It comes from the version of themselves they meet the moment they stand next to someone who actually sees. You're not walking around with intensity. You're walking around with truth. And truth has a weight weak people can't lift. It has a pressure that fragile identities can't survive. You don't even need to reveal anything out loud for the effects to begin. The moment you enter their proximity, the equilibrium they built on rehearsed charm, social masks, or projected confidence starts crumbling. Not because you're attacking it, but because your presence invalidates the illusion. That's the first cycle of pressure, the silent collapse. It hits them before they know why. A flicker, a shift, a discomfort. The feeling of being watched internally, not externally. Like someone just turned the lights on in a room they kept intentionally dark. You don't even have to speak. The truth of who they are vibrates against the truth you carry, and the weaker one always cracks. Then comes the temporary relief, the illusion of distance. They'll try to detach emotionally, try to convince themselves they're overreacting, try to pretend they're not affected, try to repaint the feeling as intimidation, intensity, mysteriousness, anything that lets them avoid admitting that the real issue is exposure. They want to believe the pressure is external, but deep inside, they know it's internal. It's always been internal. You simply amplify what they refuse to face, and the moment they try to settle back into their comfort, here comes the next wave, the recognition. They realize you're not operating from the same layer they are. They look at you and sense it instantly. Your thinking isn't linear. Your perception isn't limited. Your insight isn't rehearsed. Your awareness is systemic, multi-layered, multi-directional. You're analyzing the root while they're obsessing over symptoms. You're reading intentions while they're stuck decoding words. You're connecting patterns they didn't even realize existed. You're sensing energy shifts they try to hide behind fake calmness. And this is where the second collapse begins. The inferiority reflex. They start shrinking, not visibly at first, but internally. Their confidence stutters, their performance glitches, their persona wavers, their voice betrays uncertainty. Their energy contracts just a little. Their eyes avoid yours for half a second too long, because on some instincts-level depth they don't admit, they can feel it. You're ahead, not socially, not financially, not superficially, but cognitively, spiritually, psychologically, energetically. You think deeper, you sense clearer, you process faster, you understand wider, you evaluate cleaner, you perceive sharper. And that's the part that rattles them. They can't categorize you, they can't decode you, they can't predict you, they can't read you the way they read others. People fear the unknown, but they fear the unreadable even more, because unreadable equals uncontrollable. Uncontrollable equals threat. Your intelligence doesn't announce itself, yet its presence changes every conversation. Your depth doesn't need validation, yet it reconfigures the emotional temperature around you. Your intuition doesn't play games, yet it exposes agendas people didn't even know they were leaking. This is where the next wave builds, the comparison they don't want to make. They start noticing the contrast between your internal clarity and their internal chaos, between your emotional discipline and their emotional impulse, between your grounded presence and their jittery self-doubt, between your sharp mind and their scattered thoughts. They don't feel insecure around everyone. They feel insecure around you specifically, not because you shame them, but because you nullify the illusions they rely on. They realize their confidence isn't confidence, it's a costume. Their insight isn't insight, it's recycled ideas. Their maturity isn't maturity, it's avoidance wearing a calm expression. Their intuition isn't intuition, it's wishful thinking. You didn't expose them. You revealed the distance between who they are and who they pretend to be. And now, their body reacts before their mind can rationalize it. Posture shifts, breathing changes, speech becomes more calculated, energy becomes guarded, eyes become hesitant. This is the third collapse, the behavioral distortion. They try to impress you, try to outperform you, try to win your approval, try to match your awareness, try to mimic your language, your calm, your insight, but it doesn't work. Because you're not operating from learned behavior, you're operating from lived evolution. You aren't performing intelligence, you are intelligence. You aren't performing depth, you are depth. You aren't performing awareness, you are awareness. And for someone who relies on imitation to feel competent, standing next to the original source destroys the illusion they've built around themselves. Then comes the desperation phase, the fragility wave. This is where they either retreat completely or start acting strange. One-sided hostility, random coldness, sudden distance, forced positivity, awkward tension, weird comments, unprovoked defensiveness, all symptoms of the same root issue. They can't maintain the version of themselves they wanted you to see. Your presence dismantles the character they built. Your depth weakens the identity they rehearsed. Your intelligence destabilizes the false confidence they rely on. You're not taking anything from them, you're removing what was never real. And for many people, that kind of exposure feels like emotional suffocation. But here's the twist. The next wave is where things get even darker. Because once people recognize they cannot impress you, cannot deceive you, cannot manipulate you, and cannot outperform you, they slip into something far more revealing, self-protection at all costs. Not protection from you, protection from the reflection they see through you. They will distance themselves so they don't feel inferior. They will gossip to regain a sense of superiority. They will twist narratives to protect their ego. They will avoid you to avoid themselves. People don't run from your personality. They run from their own inadequacy. This is the moment where you must never take their distance personally. Their retreat is the confession. Their silence is the admission. Their avoidance is the evidence. You don't expose them. They expose themselves in your presence. And now comes the next relief cycle. The moment where they convince themselves, it's not them, I just need space. I don't vibe with that energy. They're too intense. They overthink. They're different. These are not explanations. These are self-defense statements, disguised as preferences. Because the truth they refuse to say out loud is, your presence demands a version of themselves they cannot maintain. Your depth requires authenticity. Your intelligence requires honesty. Your perception requires accountability. Most people can't offer that. Not consistently, not truthfully, not courageously. So they do the only thing their ego can handle. They retreat from what exposes their limitations. But the wave rises again, the final collapse. The realization that you were never the threat. They were, not to you, to their own self-image. You didn't pierce their ego. Their ego ruptured under the weight of your existence. You didn't make them insecure. Their insecurity became louder near your truth. You didn't destabilize their identity. Their identity couldn't stand next to someone unmasked. And once they realize this, once they see that your level wasn't the issue, their lack of evolution was, they break internally in a way they cannot hide. Some will try to return with fake humility. Some will hate you silently. Some will admire you from distance. Some will fear you permanently. Some will pretend they're unaffected. Some will finally confront themselves because of you. All of these are consequences of the same thing. Your depth forced them into self-evaluation. That's why your presence feels like a psychological chokehold. Not because you strangle, but because their illusions suffocate in your clarity. This is the truth most people will choke on before they admit. You are not too deep. They are too undeveloped. You are not too intelligent. They are too unprepared. You are not too intense. They are too fragile. The moment their ego collapses under the weight of your clarity, their entire internal structure begins to rearrange itself around one question they don't dare ask out loud. How does this person see what I can't? This question haunts them. It follows them home. It echoes when they lie awake at night. It vibrates through their insecurity in the moments they pretend to be calm. Because your intelligence doesn't just intimidate, it reveals the limits of theirs. Your depth doesn't just unsettle, it exposes the walls they've built internally. Your presence doesn't just shift the energy, it amplifies the emotional dissonance they've been ignoring. And once their ego absorbs that blow, the wave hits again, the fascination stage. They start paying attention to you in ways they don't admit. How you think, how you observe, how you stay composed, how your instincts guide your decisions, how effortlessly your insight slices through the mental fog they drown in. They don't understand it, but they feel it. Your intelligence is not something you wear, it's something you radiate. Your depth is not something you perform, it's something you exude. They sense that your mind doesn't move like theirs. Where they see confusion, you see structure. Where they see coincidence, you see patterns. Where they see emotion, you see motive. Where they see conflict, you see truth hidden inside reaction. Where they see people, you see psychological blueprints. And because this difference is undeniable, they begin comparing themselves to you. Not willingly, instinctively. That comparison becomes the fourth collapse, the inadequacy wave. They realize you operate with a type of vision they don't possess, a type of perception they've never developed, a type of mental precision they've never trained for, a type of spiritual weight they've never carried. It's not that you're better, you're simply forged differently, built differently, designed differently, evolved differently. You're the result of battles they never fought. Awareness sharpened through experiences they never endured, perception shaped through wounds they couldn't survive. Your depth was not gifted, it was earned, carved, paid for. And the cost is written in your eyes in a language they can't read. This is why your presence feels heavy to them, not oppressive, undeniable. There's a seriousness in you that didn't come from personality. It came from surviving your own history, a kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to demand respect because it carries the memory of everything that tried to break you and failed. They feel that weight even when you say nothing, especially when you say nothing. This begins the next relief cycle, the admiration wave. They start studying you like a reference point. They replay your sentences in their mind. They remember your words longer than they admit. They think about the way you responded, the way you held yourself, the way you stayed unshaken, the way you read them without judgment. They start craving the groundedness they feel around you, but can't replicate. Your energy resets people's internal compass without trying. Your intelligence realigns their thinking without permission. Your presence reorders their patterns without negotiation. You are not just a person to them. You are an interruption in their normal programming. But admiration has a shadow: envy. The moment someone admires what they know they cannot embody, envy forms in its place. They want your depth, but they don't want the pain that built it. They want your insight, but they don't want the self-confrontation it requires. They want your intelligence, but they don't want to abandon the illusions that keep them comfortable. They want your emotional discipline, but they don't want to release the impulses they rely on. This is the paradox. You remind people of what they could be and of what they refuse to become. Your presence holds up a mirror. Your energy demands honesty. Your intelligence forces clarity. Your awareness strips away excuses. And not everyone survives that kind of reflection. Most people retreat into the safety of their own limitations. That retreat triggers the next wave, the distancing stage. Suddenly they stop sharing details, stop opening up, stop inviting you, stop engaging fully, stop looking you in the eye, stop speaking freely, not because they dislike you, not because you did anything wrong, not because the relationship broke, but because your growth exposes their stagnation. They can't hide their jealousy around you. They can't hide their insecurity around you. They can't hide their patterns around you. They can't hide their motives around you. They fear disappointing you. They fear being seen by you. They fear being misunderstood by you. They fear being correctly understood by you even more. They don't want to be close enough to feel inferior, but they don't want to lose access to you either. So they hover, not inside, not outside, not close, not far, not friendly, not distant, just unsteady. This is the emotional limbo people create when they are terrified of being exposed but addicted to your clarity. And right when they think they've stabilized themselves again, the next pressure wave hits. The realization that your mind is expanding even faster than before. You're evolving exponentially. Your insight is sharpening. Your instincts are accelerating. Your perception is widening. Your presence is deepening. Your energy is intensifying. You're not just growing, you're outpacing entire environments. And to someone who thought they had you figured out, this becomes unbearable. Because every time you level up, the distance between you and them becomes harder to deny. You challenge their worldview simply by existing. You challenge their decisions simply by thinking differently. You challenge their comfort simply by breathing in the same room. And the final collapse hits, the one that changes everything. They realize they were never evaluating you. You were evaluating them. And you already outgrew what they still struggle to understand. That is the point of no return for most people. Not because you cut them off, but because they know they cannot meet you at your level. You don't demand depth. Depth demands you. You don't demand intelligence. Intelligence recognizes you. You don't demand honesty. Honesty gravitates toward you. You're not chasing anyone. Your level filters everyone. And here is the darkest truth of all, the one that completes the entire evolution arc. You were never meant to be understood by the average person because you were never shaped by average experiences. Your mind was built through pressure they've never felt. Your insight was sharpened through wounds they've never healed. Your depth was formed in places they've never survived. Your intelligence was carved through realizations they've never reached. Your presence was molded through loneliness they could never endure. You are not too deep. You are simply beyond the places shallow people live. You are not too intelligent. You simply operate in a dimension where their shortcuts don't work. You are not too intense. You simply stopped diluting the truth. You are not too much. You are the exact amount required for someone operating at your frequency. And that is why they react. Not because you're wrong, but because you're real. Not because you're intimidating, but because they can't hide. Not because you're complicated, but because they're unprepared. Not because you're unpredictable, but because they're unreadable only to themselves. Your presence doesn't destroy people. It destroys the illusions people hide behind. And here is the closing wave, the final dominance cycle. You are not here to shrink enough for them to understand you. You are here to rise enough for the right ones to recognize you. Because the ones operating on your level, the ones who don't flinch around depth, the ones who don't crumble under clarity, the ones who don't fear intelligence, they will not react with insecurity. They will respond with recognition. Your energy won't intimidate them. It will activate them. Your intelligence won't threaten them. It will align with them. Your depth won't overwhelm them. It will resonate with them. Because people at your level don't fear the truth. They move with it. They don't run from awareness. They wield it. They don't avoid reflection. They refine themselves with it. And you're finally stepping into the version of yourself only those people can meet. This is the end of the cycle. What you once thought was rejection was actually selection. What you once thought was isolation was actually elevation. What you once thought was loss was actually filtering. You are not operating too deeply. You are operating exactly where you were always meant to be, on a level most people cannot comprehend and never will.